If you look at the pyramids and you look at some of the structures in Egypt and all that stuff in northern Africa, what those people were doing is unexplainable even today. I don't give a fuck what I've read every fucking theory on how they built those pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza has 2,300,000 stones in it. Some of them they weigh between 2 and 80 tons. Some of them are cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away. These things that pyramid is shaped perfectly. Like, if you fucked up like a quarter inch there, a half inch here, by the time you get to the top, that thing's a mess. But meanwhile, it's not. It's perfect. It's also perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west. And they're not really sure how old it is. They think they date it to 2,500 BC, but that's just because of organic particles that they pulled from inside stones. But they also say that they probably could have sealed those stones and resealed those stones over time. You're dealing with like a gigantic mystery of unfathomable proportion.
That's crazy.
So if there was a civilization, and let's assume there was, that was thousands of years old in Egypt, that was capable of doing things that we're not capable of doing today, what kind of technology were they working with?
That's what I'm saying.
We really don't know. Now, something comes along like that Younger Dryas impact theory and just fucking asteroids everywhere.
Else.
Boom, boom, knocks the whole population of the world down to 100,000 people or 1 million people. Maybe there's like 1 billion people on the planet and 9 out of 10 of them are dead. How many of them know how to build a pyramid? Now, the Great Pyramid of Giza is probably the most stunning of all these ancient structures. And the stones are immense, and some of them were cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away. How do you think they did that?
Well, some of them, the granite in the Great Pyramid comes from more than 500 miles to the south. If you look at the famous King's Chamber, its walls and its roof are the ceiling of the King's Chamber are all made with gigantic granite blocks.
Stunning detail.
Stunning detail. Those blocks on the roof of the King's Chamber weigh 70 tons each. Now, Egyptologists will tell you that they could move heavy blocks because they put them on wet sand and they push them along on wet sand. Well, maybe if you're just at ground level, that will do. But when you're 350 feet above the ground, as you are in the King's Chamber, that won't do at all. I don't know how they did it. All I know is they did it. I don't think anybody knows how they did it, how they lifted those stones, how they brought them up to that level. I think we're looking, again, at a lost technology. And it was this ancient apocalypse 12,800 years ago that wiped that from the human memory banks almost completely. Not entirely completely because there were survivors, but removed most.
What I loved about the pyramid conspiracy is that the stakes are so low, right? There's no pedophilia.
Nothing.
Nobody's dying.
Nothing.
It's like, did it happen? Did it not happen?
It's just, how old is this civilization?
That's it. Is it 4,000? Is it 10,000?
But do you know that even with that, because Graham Hancock has a whole series.
They call you racist and
He's
shit
calling
like
him
that.
racist.
I'm not saying that black people didn't still do it. It's just older black people.
100% was black people.
Yeah, yeah.
It was 100% people in Africa. The pyramids were 100% built by people who lived in Africa.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
All Graham Hancock is saying is that it's very likely that the entire world experienced a cataclysmic disaster around 11,800, 12,000 years ago, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And it knocked us back into the Stone Age.
Dude,
but those people who were around before that were probably more sophisticated than we are. We just have a hard time imagining that.
Yeah.
Because we don't have any evidence of it.
And we just don't think that the execution matches up with the technology. If we found some tech that would make sense, I think that we could go, okay, maybe this did happen 4,000 years ago, or whatever it is. But so far, the idea of like a chisel and a stone carving all these blocks and then people just dragging them in the sand, I think it seems a little bit
There's some real
unreasonable.
problems with that.
Yeah.
There's some real problems with the actual physical limitations of the size of these obelisks, where they're cutting them in the mountains and they have to move them hundreds of miles. How are you getting them out of the mountains? Like, what are you doing? This is like 2,000 tons. Like, what the fuck are you saying?
Yeah. You said it, I think I was listening to the pod with you guys and you were like, if I was Elon Musk, I'd just build one. And I get that to a certain extent.
I don't know if you could. I really don't know if you could.
I think we could.
Do you know if you cut and place 10 stones a day, it would take you 664 years to make the pyramid? That might be wrong. But there's 2,300,000 stones in the Great Pyramid.
You need to go, man.
I know, I do.
You need to go. It was the craziest thing that I've seen that humans have made. Like, awe-inspiring.
Talking to Ben, talking to Randall Carlson, talking to Graham Hancock, I more and more think that we just have to use our imagination.
Yeah.
Because we're thinking of technology only as technology that we've implemented, like these microphones and cell phones and shit. But it's possible there was a completely different branch of technology, and they had figured out something that allowed them to manipulate enormous stones.
Yeah.
We just haven't figured it out yet.
I mean, just think about it like this. Like, imagine there was this cataclysm, right? Within 100 years, like, this idea of Wi-Fi is non-existent to people.
Non-existent.
It's a story that you tell. So wait, what do you mean? The
Wizardry.
internet? Yeah, exactly. It's just absurd. It doesn't exist. You can't hold on to it.
Right.
So right now we're looking for all these tools that you can hold on to and can build things with, and that makes sense to us. But we can't conceive of this like technology that existed just in the air.
Yeah.
How would you describe Wi-Fi to some dude that you met in an Amazonian tribe?
You wouldn't.
You couldn't.
You couldn't.
Maybe they cultivated powers of the human mind that we dismiss and regard as completely unimportant. You know, woo-woo.
Yeah, this is the thoughts about Egypt, correct?
It's about Egypt and about other things. I mean, the specific example I give is above the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid are 5 further chambers. And these chambers are roofed and floored with granite beams that weigh about 70 tons each. And there are hundreds of them. And these 70-ton granite beams, which to put in context, a 70-ton beam is equivalent in weight to 35 large SUVs. These 70-ton granite beams have been elevated to a height of more than 350 feet above the ground and carefully and precisely placed in position. It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. You can say, oh, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp. But then you have to confront basic laws of physics. You can't haul a stone weighing tens of tons up a slope that exceeds 10 degrees. Then you start doing the calculation. How long a ramp do I need with a 10-degree slope to get to 350 feet above the ground? And the answer is you need a fucking long ramp, which should still be there, because it couldn't have been a sand ramp. It would have collapsed under the weight of those stones. It had to be as massive as the pyramid itself. So this begins to seem like an absurd idea, the idea that is foisted on us by archaeology. Maybe the idea that they regard as absurd, namely that psychic powers were cultivated by ancient civilizations, that they could use powers of the human mind that we have allowed to lapse, maybe that idea deserves further consideration. We have gone down a path of leverage and mechanical advantage. We're used to relying on machines, but we hear anecdotal reports of people who have telekinetic powers, who can move things with their minds, of people who have telepathic powers. And our automatic reaction is to just dismiss all of that because science says it's impossible, because science regards consciousness as local to the brain and doesn't see how it can exert itself outside of that. But maybe we should open up to those possibilities, that we're dealing with a very different kind of culture that used techniques that we have allowed to lapse. And maybe we could wake those techniques up again. Maybe the ability of human beings to do almost superhuman things is resident within all of us, but sleeping.
Well, it's pure speculation that they use some sort of a telekinetic power, but it's
pure
absolute,
speculation.
But it's absolute that they did something that we don't understand. If you think about the distance between us and the construction, just the modern accepted construction dates of the Great Pyramid, it's more than 5,000 years ago, or close to 5,000 years ago.
Great Pyramid is supposed to be about 4,500 years old,
That's really old.
It's incredibly old,
To think that someone back then could do something that would perplex us today with modern machinery.
Yeah.
And that somehow or another they figured this out. It's almost like what they had done was leave behind something that was so stupendous, so monstrously impressive that it would transcend time.
Yeah.
And that you would have to look at it even thousands and thousands of years later and say, hey, like this defies conventional explanation. This is not a simple, and I've seen some of the conventional explanations of the construction of the pyramid, and they conveniently neglect those chambers above the King's Chamber.
They do.
They conveniently neglect a lot of those massive stones.
Yeah.
And it's because it's one of those things you just go, oh, I don't know. What is this, Jamie?
There are the chambers
above
above the king's chambers, and each one of those floors consists of a row of 70-ton granite blocks that have been raised 350 feet above the ground. And not only that, but brought from Aswan in the south of Egypt, 500 kilometers south of the Great Pyramids.